Hey guys, welcome back to The Bull Combo, your source for album reviews, vlogs, live music, and more. Today we're talking Extinction, the latest album by Unearth, so stick around while we find out whether or not these Massachusetts metalcore masters still have what it takes. Alright guys, so Unearth have been around for 2 decades now, and they're one of those bands from the New England hardcore scene that is really responsible for pioneering the modern metalcore hardcore sound. Over that almost 2-decade period, they released several albums. All of these albums do fall in line with a very similar style sound. But I think it's really cool that in an era where a lot of bands are trying to switch their genres, trying to incorporate new types of music to stay fresh, it's really cool to see Unearth stay tried and true to what they know, stick to their roots, and really just continuously release albums that are really good and really heavy, just have a lot of memorable moments. So Extinction is no different. I feel like Extinctions is the next progression for Unearth. Now, you're not going to hear anything on this album that you haven't heard come from Unearth before. I mean, that's kind of impossible at this point. But I do think that they kind of transitioned the tone of this album a little bit as opposed to Watchers of Rule. Whereas Watchers of Rule was very metal inspired, very technically proficient, I feel like Extinctions is a little bit on the opposite end of the spectrum. It's more hardcore related, a lot more breakdowns, a lot more brutalness inside of the music. I feel like there's just a little bit more grittiness to these songs than there was on the last album, which is totally fine. As you listen to this album, you'll probably hear some things that sound a little bit familiar from some earlier Unearth work. I definitely feel like a lot of the riffs on this album do pull inspiration from their first album, The Stings of Conscience, and I think they tried to add a rough around the edges sound to some of these riffs to kind of harken back to their early days and just kind of show people that they can still do what they did when they were first coming out onto the scene, and I think that that's pretty cool. You can expect this album to have a lot of breakdowns. Nowhere near as many guitar solos as Watchers of Rule. While there are guitar solos to this, I mean, let's be real, it's an Unearth album. Not quite as prevalent as they were on the last album, but that's okay because, again, this album does have a much different tone. In terms of the sound on the album, clearly they're going for a more apocalyptic style tone. That's never been something Unearth has strayed from. I know The Oncoming Storm also had kind of an apocalyptic tone to it, but I feel like this one is more of a real world based apocalyptic tone. It seems like they're referencing things more often like war, global warming, climate change, etc. Kind of real world post-apocalyptic scenarios instead of the fictional post-apocalyptic stories or songs that they may have written or touched on previously. So it's a little bit of a change in terms of the subject matter for Unearth. I feel like they're getting a little more serious and they're tackling some more serious real world issues, which is awesome. It's just a little bit of a change from some of their previous stuff, so some people may notice that right off the bat. A great example of that is One with the Sun. I feel like that song's pretty much directly talking about climate change and how the temperature is changing on our planet, and I think that's a really cool way of relaying that message, a really cool way of telling that story. And I think the song really does a good job of that. So there's several highlights on this album for sure. If you're a fan of Unearth, and their big, open, epic riffs with those soaring breakdowns underneath, then you're probably not going to be let down on this album. The first 3 songs on the album, Incinerate, Dust, and Survivalist, are all rippers. They're really heavy, a lot of really cool breakdowns and some cool trichord riffs mixed in there. I really like the tone that Unearth is going for on this album. Again, it definitely seems like they're going for a more grittier, organic approach to these songs and some of the larger wall of sound style that they've gone for in some of their previous albums, and it's definitely obvious here. I think the other thing that's going to be really obvious on this album is Trevor Phipp's vocal tone. Now, I feel like there's going to be people on both sides of the fence here. There's going to be people that are saying that he sounds like this because he's lost his voice or blown it out, and there's going to be people that saying he sounds like this because he's trying to more clearly articulate his words and make them clear. So, from my personal opinion, I don't think that he's blown his voice out. Now, I will say that only because I saw them at Warped Tour this year, and he sounded like he's always sounded. There was no difference in his tone whatsoever. So if you want my personal opinion, I feel like he recorded these songs on purpose like that to make his vocals a little bit clearer. Maybe it was a new style he was trying. Maybe he wants his words to be articulated a little bit better so that the lyrics can be a little bit more memorable. Whatever the case may be, it definitely sounds like he took a different approach to recording the vocals on this album and definitely stepped outside his comfort zone a little bit and did things he doesn't normally do. So I don't really think it's Trevor's voice being blown as much as it is Trevor trying to articulate his words a little bit better and kind of relay those lyrics in a bit of a different fashion. It very well could be that he did blow his voice out, but I don't really think that's the case at this point. I did see some comments floating around there about people listening to our first couple songs and commenting on certain parts of the song and saying, the scream sounds weak, it doesn't sound like something he would do. And I'm a little bit hesitant to say that his voice is blown out because there's vocalists that have been doing it much longer than him that scream way worse than him that are still doing it. So if you wanted my opinion, I would bet that it's probably the tone that he's using on purpose and that he's doing this on purpose to articulate his words better. Whatever the case may be, you could definitely hear the vocals probably the clearest of any Unearth album ever. And I think that that just adds to the depth of the album, because when you can follow along to the lyrics as well as the music, it just makes for a more memorable listening experience. So overall, 2 thumbs up to Unearth for that. That's very, very cool. In terms of the things I didn't like, there was very few things I didn't like about this album. The one thing I did feel like is that some of the songs feel a little watered down. There are points where I was expecting something a little bit bigger from Unearth than what I got. And again, that may be because of the tone they're going for on the album, I'm not quite sure. But there were some moments where I expected a really huge soaring guitar solo or a really devastating breakdown. And while something may have come in to some effect, it wasn't quite what I was expecting. So there was a couple letdown moments on the album where they could have taken it even one step further and maybe made it an amazing album rather than just a great album. So I know those are ticky-tack things and probably really personal things, but from a songwriting perspective, that's really the only thing I had to complain about on the album. Now, in terms of the production quality album, here's where I kind of have some complaints a little bit. I was listening to the album at home, I've listened to it in my surround sound system, and in my living room, I've also listened to it in the system in my car. When I'm listening to this in a car, for some reason, the vocals and the guitars are really, really drowned out. Now, I'm not trying to EQ anything, I'm not doing any sort of special EQing, so I'm just going, right off of what it sounds like on the album. And I did notice that the drums and the bass kind of wash the guitar and vocals out a little bit at times, depending upon what device you're listening to this album through. So just keep that in mind. If you're listening to this in your car and you feel like it's washed out a little bit sounding, try listening to it someplace else and see if you're still getting the same thing. I'm actually curious to see if you guys hear this as well. I'm not really sure what it is about the production quality, about the mix on this album, but for some reason it feels like the bass is a little bit overpowering, and not in a way that hits really hard, in a way that kind of just muddies things down. So again, curious to see your opinion on that, guys, but those are the 2 things I really didn't like about the album. Overall, they're pretty minor. And I think overall, Unearth has released a really solid album here, guys. Unearth's not one to release a bad album. I don't think they've ever released a bad album. But I do feel like this album is definitely up there with some of their better albums. And while it doesn't necessarily have the metal edge that their last album, Watchers of Rule, did, it really does harken back to their earlier hardcore sound that they used. And I really do like that. I do think it's cool that they're paying some homage to their roots here by going back and playing some of that heavier, grittier style metal that they haven't done in a couple albums. So very, very awesome stuff here from Unearth, guys. No clean vocals on this album. Nothing from Ken Susi there, which is fine. I feel like he pops up every couple albums and then disappears for another couple albums and he'll be back. So guys, I'm really curious to see how you feel about this album. Make sure to comment down below and let me know your opinions. Does it stack up to Watchers of Rule? Is it weaker than their previous albums? Is this one of your favorite albums by them? I really want to know what you guys think. Let me know what your favorite song is down below. I think my favorite song right now is probably Dust. The intro to that song is just brutal, guys, and the way that they have that breakdown underneath the big open airy chords is just, I love it. So yeah, let me know what your favorite song is down below, guys. If you liked the video, make sure to click that thumbs up button and give the video a like. And if you like the content you're seeing here, please, guys, feel free to subscribe and click that bell to get notified. I'm coming at you guys with a new video every week, and I don't want you to miss it. Other than that, guys, I hope you guys all have a great rest of your week. I want to thank you for checking this out, and until next time, we will see you soon.